and it's so true. Each kill is so special and unique in its own way. I was saying, I really love the first one, like as an introduction to what's about to happen. It's so creepy to me. And also it just shows, this is so gnarly, but it's like only the beginning of what Johnny can do.
Something's not right, man. Get it through your head.
Animals don't get too.
First of all, have either of you been able to see the film with an audience yet?
Yes. At some chance. I think it was our first time and it was so epic.
It's about as epic as a first viewing as you could possibly ask for.
That's amazing. I can imagine that being a very surreal experience. But Ry, body language is really important when it comes to conveying a voiceless killer. And given that Johnny's prominent positioning in the frame, he's even more important as he's essentially the primary character. How did you get Johnny's body language down?
A lot of it was I kind of gave myself some rules after, watching every slasher, rewatching a bunch and finding every new one that I could and talking to Chris and, kind of walking through the whole thing as to what the speeds were going to be and how Johnny would move. I watched a lot of animal attack videos, like specifically bear attack videos too, because of some elements that come up in the film. Not that I exactly wanted to it's more of a bit of a metaphor, but I wanted to, there's something crazy about animal attacks where animals look peaceful and they're cute and they're cuddly. And then when they attack, they just go into this wild, ferocious kind of violence that just, it's hard to explain other than to just, when you see it. So I kind of wanted to do Johnny's violent scenes like that. So when he moves into a different gear, he changes speeds altogether. And when he does do something violent, it's just hard hitting and rigid and just kind of ugly. But it was just, I was just setting myself up with some rules to kind of stick by, to be consistent with it and to try to make sure I just gave it my all whenever those sequences happened, to just be completely out of energy at the end of it.
When I know someone like Kane Hodder, who famously played Jason for 4 different movies, he had different rules like the breathing, the head turn before the body. Did you have any specific rules like that? Yeah,
I did actually, and I've watched a ton of Kane stuff too, and a bunch of a lot of the classic the actors who played these roles, and Peter Weller's RoboCop and stuff too. There's a bunch of stuff. I actually kind of did an opposite thing of what Kane did with how he does the head first and then the body. I kind of did it the opposite, but there was kind of a reason for that too, because if I turned my head, sometimes the mask, we had a cutout so that I could actually see, because sometimes with the full mask on, you can't see. So if, depending on the distance that Pierce was behind me with the camera, if I turned my head, you'd see my nose sticking out. So I would have to kind of turn my body and start to turn that way so that I could give time for him to kind of come around, and then I'd go that way. But yeah, that was kind of one of the funny things that I would do, just to that was more of a functional, technical thing that I started doing with the body. But then the other thing is that inside of that mask, I had some leeway too, because I could actually turn my head a bit without the mask actually moving. So I could kind of turn my head and see where I was going this direction and then straighten out and look like I know exactly where I'm going without turning the head at all too. So that kind of came into play too.
Well, and Andrea, a lot of people die in this film, and I know that can be quite fun as an actor to actually film. So as the final girl, did you feel left out at all?
No, because you know how fun it was to just scream in the woods and have that be my montage moment. No, but it was, I mean, definitely I'm a little bit jealous of not having a death, but it was so, God, I just had so much fun. I had so much fun running and screaming and bringing a bit more depth to this final girl.
Yeah. Oh, and do you have a favorite kill of all of them?
Yeah, but you know what? Okay, so, and Ry mentioned this earlier, and it's so true. Each kill is so special and unique in its own way. And of course, there are the kills that everyone is talking about, the yoga one. But I was saying, I really love the first one. There's something so, as an introduction to what's about to happen, it's so creepy to me. And also it just shows, this is so gnarly, but it's only the beginning of what Johnny can do, which is already so messed up, this first kill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The intro.
Well, and so one thing that I was very curious about, because so much of the film is following Johnny, and with it being full frame, I feel like it makes every single motion all the more important. So Ry, the blocking, how is the blocking going? Were you constantly being directed of like, okay, stop here, to the right here? Like, what was that process like?
It was no, there was more or less just knowing which point of the script that we were in, like as to which speed kind of Johnny should be moving at that point and what like his motivation was, or if he wasn't, he was just moving in a direction and then his motivation would come from a sound he heard or something he sees or something. For the kill scenes, those were much more meticulous. They had to kind of like very much like a puzzle. Everything had to work. The cinematography, the special effects, by movements, everything, and the actor getting whatever happened to them. Everyone had to just be exactly what needed to happen to make that kind of scene work, which is because the practical effects are designed ahead of time and it's kind of a puzzle piece to kind of fit it all together and everything. But Chris, he had it all planned out. It was all figured out. Like everyone were pros and involved in doing all those scenes. So the fact that you can just trust it and sit back and watch all those pieces come together and watch the scene happen in real time, like while you're just kind of sitting there, I'd step back and just watch them go to work, and it was fucking amazing. Seeing what ended up on screen and it looking exactly like what they were doing there, it's pretty cool.
Well, I know that sometimes the special effects guys take over for like the close-ups to get the kills right. How hands-on did you get to be with the kills themselves?
Pretty much there the whole time until they needed to kind of step out and either put in a dummy or have just a specific, like my arm in there. I'd be behind the camera and our arm would do something or things like that. But I was pretty much there for all of it. We didn't really have anyone else step in for anything that I can think of, at least.
Well, there's always those fun stories from like the Friday the 13th films where a lot of the time it's like Tom Savini that was actually the one holding the knife. So I was very curious since it's very close. There's a lot of close-ups and there's stuff like that where I was like, I'm curious how much you got to actually perform yourself.
Yeah, there's definitely some stuff in there like that. I'd have to sit down and kind of watch the scene and be like, that wasn't me. That might have been Chris. That might have been, because the hands were, they had prosthetic hands that went over they were gloves that went over my hands. That were molded on my hands, but anyone could kind of slide them on if they needed to do something like that. But I think I was there for most of it. It just would have been like insert, pick up kind of stuff that they would have needed.
Well, and that smoking mask is such an iconic look. And so it's interesting to me that you said that that it was cut out for a lot of the times. When it wasn't cut out, were you able to see? Did you have much peripheral vision with it? Like, was it just like a pinhole?
There's the big goggles. They had Chris made a bunch of different versions actually, which was hugely helpful to me for that exact version to be able to see and to be on screen if I needed to turn. So there was versions with the glass in it and then versions without. So the ones with glass were whenever there was a up close shot of Johnny, the glass had to be in there. But the thing is with that is that it would fog up really fast. So whenever there was a wider shot or anything, we'd have the glass goggle or just the bars that are there, which you get enough visibility. It's just something you kind of have to work. You work with and you figure out how to work with it. You either time or place your steps so you know exactly where you need to be, or work backwards and like you figure it out with the choreography. And it just adds another element to anything. Any time you're doing something in a suit like that, there's always some extra elements you just kind of got to work out on the spot and figure it out. And we, once you're in it for a few days, you kind of get it down.
Well, I'm a big slasher guy, so being able to talk about like the technical side, I love that so much because that's always the stuff that I love about it that I feel like kind of gets overlooked a bit. And so I talked to Chris the other day and he said that he does have ideas for another entry. I'm curious as to where you guys personally would like to see your characters go. Andrea, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it'd be really cool to explore the effects of everything that has happened to my character. Like in long term, how does the trauma of witnessing some of the gnarliest kills, what does that do to a person? What do you do with that? How do you get out of it? Like, where the hell does she go from here? I think that'd be really fascinating to explore.
Ry, where are you seeing Johnny's journey go?
I don't know. And like I said this before too, and I talked to Chris about this because it kind of has that Halloween ending where the whole thing is, the scary part is that he's still out there and that you don't know if he's coming back or anything like that. So it doesn't necessarily warrant a sequel. And I know Chris was mentioning something about a prequel kind of ideas. I don't know if that's what he mentioned to you too, but personally, I mean, I'd be back for anything if anyone wanted to do anything with John. I'd love to play Johnny again. I kind of like the idea of developers coming into his neck of the woods and building a resort or something like that, digging up his ground and I don't know, it'd just be a different twist on what Johnny could do, sort of thing.
So my first question is, just how much of a Friday the 13th fan are you?
Definitely more of a poser.
Oh.
No, this is like the thing I'm dreading most is like everybody like asks me like, so you really dig this? I'm like, I have appreciation for the genre as a whole. I love the fact that you can't narrow down Friday the 13th to be anything specific. The fact that the first one is Mother, the fact that the second one is like Baghead, he doesn't even like embrace his iconography until the third one. Mm-hmm. And then he becomes a zombie, but then there's also the one where it wasn't even really him. There's so much, like the actual series as a whole, as one giant piece of art, as a series, I think is incredible. When I break it down into individual elements, there's definitely ones that I like more than others. I'm a sap that really likes Part 5.
Oh, well, I'm a big Part 5 fan too, so we're on the same page there.
It's a Robert Altman movie with Jason in it.
Well, and I'm also a big fan of Part 2, so I was very happy to see Lauren Taylor pop up at the end of your film. So that pretty much made my day. So thank you for that casting.
Literally, it was our pleasure. She was amazing. She was like, yeah, really loved having her. And I think she just elevates that whole scene.
And I think that there are some clear similarities between Johnny and Jason in terms of their origins and even like kill style. And I mean, slightly in their unmasked forms as well. But you clearly made a conscious choice to go very different when it came to weapon and mask. And I'd argue that those are two like absolutely massive elements for a slasher killer. So how did you come upon those choices of the hook and that leather smoke mask?
The mask, I originally stumbled across, I think, on a cracked.com article where there was just a list of like creepy things from the past type. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, why isn't this in a slasher movie? This is like one of the scariest things I've ever seen. Just nothing about this looks like somebody's going to help you if they're wearing it. So that's where that came from. And then I also just always wanted to set the film in Northern Ontario and have it tie into just the whole environment. And it's a community like that whole area. It's got a history of logging. It's got a history of like mineral, like mining and stuff, and using the logging industry as kind of like a jumping off point for like the whole mythology of them, and then using like logging tools and then tying that in with, wildfire fighting and stuff, and everything kind of there was a lot of synchronicity there tying it all together, which was just happy accidents, lots of happy accidents building the design of Johnny.
Well, and what made you want to shoot the film in full frame? Because it seems to be a common choice these days, and I'm always interested in what the reasoning behind it is.
Well, I was really the whole movie is kind of aping Gus Van Sant's style in the 2000s when he made like Jerry and Elephant and Last Days. But so there was that aspect of it that he shot full frame for those, but mainly it was because I wanted it to, as different as it is, I wanted to do feel like how it felt like when I was watching Friday the 13th, like as a kid. You're watching them on full frame VHS tapes. You're not watching them in widescreen in 4K where you see every little mistake that could be possibly made in the film. You're watching it, just Academy ratio. And I was like, that's kind of why I wanted to do it. I just wanted it to be more similar to that experience than anything.
When did you find that to be challenging? Because like I would think that since so much of the film is following Johnny from behind, so you have a big hulking brute in the center of your frame, I would think that the full frame would be very limiting in terms of him taking up so much of the frame. So was there any difficulty with that?
Finding the balance took some time for sure. But in the end, we think that like him taking up room, like, because he is taking up more room in a full frame for sure. But once we found the right balance for the space he had, aesthetically, it just kind of fell into place where it was like, yeah, he's supposed to be like a part of the forest. He's supposed to like be balanced with the forest. Whereas if it was widescreen, where we had way more of nature there, I feel like it would kind of drown him out. And it wasn't like that was never the intention. He was supposed to be, part of nature.
I'm always very curious as to what the different reason, because every director always has a different reasoning for why they're shooting in full frame. So that's why I was very, very curious about that. So great answer with that. And I also saw the Gus Van Sant influence very clearly. It took me about 20 minutes, and then I was like, oh, duh. Yeah, this is very clearly Gus Van Sant. What made you want to meld these two very different types of films together? Because obviously people don't think Gus Van Sant when they think slasher.
I just like the pace. I just like the pace of his movies. I like the vibe, and I like the kind of the challenge of seeing like whether or not it would work. Because I grew up like I'm just a horror kid, but at that point in time when Elephant and Jerry and stuff were coming out, I was just getting into film school. So I was like, I had my complete like bullshit film school radar on, being like, oh, this is high art. And I was like, how do we make high art, horror film? Yeah. This was before, of course, elevated genre was being thrown around everywhere. Yeah. And I just thought, like, yeah, what would be a great subgenre of horror film that could take these aesthetic elements and not feel incredibly ham-fisted. And I think like slashers just existing in their environment, and so much of what his style is like having characters exist in their environment. It just seemed like a no-brainer.
Well, and the kills in this movie are absolutely brutal. I know you have a special effects background, and so how important was it for you to go the practical route with these effects?
I think the background that I have in practical prosthetics, it just lends to the fact that like I know how I can achieve them that way. Whereas like I don't have any VFX background, so I wouldn't even know how to like achieve anything using any kind of VFX other than like, no, you just shoot your footage and then you give it to somebody else, and then they do some sort of magic, and then all of a sudden things look slightly worse than they would if you did it practically. So that was the whole approach to it. But there's so many VFX shots in this movie that are invisible, and I feel like that's kind of where VFX thrives. So like for the lake death, for instance, there's it's different plates of like a locked off scene just comped into each other, but you have ripples of water going through every one. So like nothing is, so finding like our VFX team at Wild Effects blending all that stuff together and making that look seamless, like that stuff that blows my mind.
Yeah, that's incredible. I had no idea from watching it.
How they did that. Also, there was a camper trailer beside the cabin that we shot at, and our other VFX guy that we hired, Arv, he was able to like erase that from the background, and it was not an easy thing to erase. So stuff like that, where I'm like, these guys, these people are the true heroes.
Yeah. When I remember hearing, so Ari Aster talked about in Hereditary, where because he had a lot of long takes, and he said that ended up being very difficult in the editing process, because then you're not able, you don't have as much coverage to be able to essentially affect your film in the edit. So did you come to did you come across any difficulties in the edit because of having these long takes?
No, not at all. Knowing that like we had nothing to cut away from, it was just like, yeah, there's nothing to cut away from. Like, no. Like that's it. There is no solution. And also it comes to the point where if we did cut away from it anyways, it would kind of like mess up the flow. And so much of this movie is kind of like a vibe movie for what it is. You know, you're just supposed to like float through it. So yeah, less cuts, the better.
When one of the hallmarks of any slasher film is always if there's going to be any sequels. And so do you have any ideas for any potential sequel?
Yeah, I do. There's stuff brewing. You know, the more I'm sitting with the movie and like the mythology and just thinking of like ways that we can different branches we can go with a sequel that aren't going to be entirely retreading the same thing, but also kind of following the same aesthetics that we've been establishing. And yeah, there's definitely stuff there that
Awesome.
I feel like we can explore, or just send them to space. There's that too.
Yeah, that's always your last option. And I gotta ask as well, if you could direct any entry from any major horror franchise, what horror franchise would you choose?
Oh, hands down, Evil Dead, just because it is the one that influenced me the most, I would say.
That is awesome. Great answer. Great answer.
Animals don't get too hung up on reason. They just keep killing.